Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session on data governance in data science and innovation. My name is Jelle Hoedemakers. I work at Agoria. Agoria is the industry federation for the Belgian technology industry. And within Agoria, I'm an expert on digital, specifically on data and AI, everything relating to policy, regulation, and standardization. But next to that, maybe on a more personal note, I'm a technology optimist. If there is something new, like now we have with AI, I love it. I love to play around with it. So things like that, sign me up. Self-driving cars, yes, please. I would immediately get one. No driving for me anymore. Personalized healthcare, yes, please give it to me all. But the reality is that we've been talking about these things already for quite some time, but we're not there yet. And one of the main reasons we're not there, from our perspective, is, well, to make these things run, you need data. You need data, a lot of data, and data from a lot of different sources. And that is key, and also the point where data governance comes in. If we want to be able to have the European single market for data, which is currently the vision of the European Commission, we will need to be able to share data amongst each other. And data governance plays a crucial role in this. So I will be moderating today's session, and next to me is my co-moderator, Simon.
Thank you, Jelle. My name is Simon Klaus. I work as a data expert at Digital Flanders. Digital Flanders, that is the regional government administration of Flanders that is responsible for the digital transformation of Flanders. However, data governance is a very broad and difficult term. It refers and can refer to a lot of things, for example, to organizational processes, to the different roles someone or an organization take within this data cycle, but it can also refer to legal policies. Think about the very known Data Governance Act just put in place, but it can also refer to technical processes such as standards and interoperability. While it's good that this very important topic of data governance is addressed, our current feeling is that there is too broad of a topic. There are different interpretations of the topic, and there is even a disconnect of how data governance is being dealt with in science, for example, in Horizon Europe or Digital Europe program, and more into how it's taken up in innovations and in industry. How to foster these data governance models to drive data science and innovation, what is available so far, what is currently missing, and what the future should bring, that is on the table for today, this session. To set the scene of this session on data governance, we would first like to welcome Dr. Raf Buyle. Raf Buyle, he's a seasoned data expert who has worked on strategic projects for local and regional governments since 2002. That's a long time. He focused on implementing a more streamlined and interoperable e-government system, promoting open data, standards, and processes. Raf is also the innovation lead at Atumi, that is the Flemish data utility company. Raf holds a PhD in information engineering, technology. He's a researcher at Ghent University, where he also explores the role and the potential of semantic web concepts, technologies, and applications. He's also an active member of the open data community and a real advocate of open data policies. Raf, please give him a warm welcome. The floor is yours.
Simon, thank you for your kind introduction. So, good afternoon. As mentioned, I'm wearing two hats. On the one hand, the hat of an employee of the Flemish government, where I'm working at the crossroads of the public and private sector. On the other hand, I'm wearing another hat. I'm a researcher at Ghent University, which gives me a unique perspective from both sides. Now, we're in the data game with all different kinds of acts from the European Commission. And when you're in a game, you need rules and you need a referee. In this case, it's the European Commission, which ensures with the different acts that data can flow. Because when data starts to flow, there will be more data and more innovation. But we see that a lot of researchers, a lot of companies, a lot of governments, they are struggling to implement these rules, to implement these laws. And that's kind of a problem. You have a problem on the one hand to be compliant, but on the other hand, we don't have the benefits of these stunning laws. And because of this, data is not flowing smoothly. Now, what are the challenges or what are the hurdles why data is not flowing? Well, first of all, when I want to publish my data in a controlled way, in line with the European acts, I face a huge technological cost, an upfront investment to publish my data. Second, we have lack of standardization, and also different standards from the different perspectives are conflicting. When, for instance, in the context of a digital twin, I'm reusing public sector information, for instance, data about mobility or data about air quality, that is the focus from the public sector. But when I'm reusing it and I'm applying algorithms and science, and I come into the world of data science, well, then we have other standards, often conflicting, that apply. Also, we don't have implementations where we have stable references to the original data sets or algorithms, which makes it very hard to build upon those results. So technological cost, lack of standardization, and third of all, a lack of trust. Lack of trust when I'm going to publish my data. What will happen with my data? It's a bit like the discussions we had over 10 years ago in the context of open data, where we also had like the 50 shades of no. No, I'm not going to publish my data because they might challenge my research, they might abuse my data, they might have other interpretation of my data. So a lack of trust. And because of these three hurdles, data is not yet flowing smoothly. Now, there's a huge opportunity because Europe is focusing on a single market for data, also for research data. You can compare it with the huge paradigm shift of the single market we have on persons and goods. And there we see that it's important to publish the research data because other researchers can build upon it. You can reuse also the data in different contexts and link it to other research domains. But one of the hurdles, as I already mentioned, is a lack of trust. When we look, not in the research domain, but in society as a whole, there's a lack of trust on what companies are doing with our data. And therefore, I brought a number, the number 7. 7 out of 10 users, or if you want, citizens, don't trust companies with their data. So this means that 7 out of 10 of you in the audience doesn't trust companies with your data. That's a huge problem. And on the one hand, we see that's a problem in the context of data altruism, because we have a huge potential of data of citizens that could be, when anonymized, could be reused in the research domain. But probably, if we're not trusting companies with our data, also me as a researcher, I might not trust companies with my research data. Because on the one hand, even when I have the incentives to publish my data, what will happen with my data? I might lose control, because if today I publish a paper, yeah, the rights on the paper are not my rights. Imagine then when I publish the data, what will happen with the rights on the data? Will I lose control over my research data? So this might be one of the questions that we could challenge during the panel. Now, when we are publishing data and we're looking for a trusted party, which parties do we trust? Well, it depends. If we look at the model and views on data in the United States, there you have a minimal governance, and the control is at level of big tech. So full control in the private sector over data. When we look at another example, China, there all control over the data is at the level of the government. And in Europe, if you take a close look at the X, we are looking for a third way. In Europe, we want to put citizens, researchers, companies in full control of their data. They will choose with who they are sharing their data and for how long they're sharing it. And there's a nice fit with the ideas of Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Sir Tim invented the World Wide Web over 30 years ago. We cannot imagine a society without the web anymore. And the web started with simple standards that allowed any browser to browse at CERN any scientific information at any server. And you could link between the domains without having a physical handshake. Now today, Sir Tim is focusing on how do we put citizens again in control of their data? How do we put researchers or even companies in control of their data with a new initiative called Solid? Solid is like a data vault where you're in control and you can choose with who you're sharing your data and for how long. And this is really a paradigm shift, because when we look at the left hand of the slide, we see the current situation where data is under control of big tech. And although Europe is having new acts that put like a legal ceiling on top of the current situation, still there's a huge chasm of the current challengers, the current companies that have no control, that have no access to the data. And then we want a paradigm shift where data is no longer controlled by big tech, but controlled by us as an individual, as a researcher, or as a company. And when we're in control of our data and we start to share the data, well, then you create a level playing field where new companies, new researchers will have access to the data. There will be more data, and because there will be more data, there will be more innovation. So the concept is that as an individual, or as a company, when I generate data, it's not generated in the different cluttered applications, which have the problem that we have a lack of transparency. But the other problem is that the data is locked inside the applications and is not portable. So if the application dies, or I stop using the application, probably my data will also die. On the right hand, we have the solid concept, where we are fully in control of our data. We can share the data with whom we want to share it, and if there's a new party we would like to collaborate with, we can just share our data because it's not locked anymore in the different applications. And this could be of huge benefit in the current challenges of data spaces. One of the challenges is that the data spaces could become data silos, where each domain has its own standards, its own governance. And then for me as a scientist, it's a huge challenge because I cannot link my data between, for instance, the domain of health and the domain of mobility. So there we need a view where when I'm in control of my data, I can link the data with the different domains. And there in Flanders, Flanders is since over 10 years a front-runner in standardizations with the initiative Open Standards for Linked Organizations, and also in the context of the Flemish Resilient post-COVID program, we invested a lot in building blocks like the Flemish data space. Also, on an interfederal level, we have the Belgian Data Space Alliance, where we link the best practices of all initiatives in Flanders, and with one voice, we challenge the ideas at level of the European Commission. But in order to get this vision in place, we need standards. And at this moment, and I mentioned it at the start of my talk, when we see the elephant, we all have a different perspective. The perspective of a scientist, perspective of the public sector, the perspective of the private sector, and we all see something different. And therefore, it's very crucial that we put standards in place, because then we will see the whole elephant and data spaces will become interoperable. One of the frontrunners there, one of the initiatives is the CEMIC initiative from Interoperable Europe, which is since over a decade focusing on a level playing field to create these standards in order to let data flow. And I would like to invite you all the 27th of June in Brussels, because there will be the next CEMIC conference, and there you will have the opportunity to discuss with other colleagues from around the world, and also with the European Commission, what challenges there are and which solutions on interoperability to let data flow. Now, to conclude, we have challenges, which I already addressed. And in the past, we had those challenges also. And one of the answers of the governments were utilities as an answer to societal challenges. Now, we have been investing in utilities like gas and electricity for decades, but governments have been even investing for millennia in utilities. Think about the old Rome that invested in aqueducts to make the water flow, in roads to make information to travel around the entire Roman Empire. And because of that, because of the utilities, they could build a society, a sustainable society of over 1 million inhabitants. It took medieval societies until even the 18th century for cities like London or Paris to grow on a sustainable way. So utilities are important, and therefore Flanders invested in data utilities as an answer to, we have acts, but how do you implement it? So we created building blocks and the governance to help companies to overcome the existing challenges. And therefore we created the Flemish data utility company, Atumi, which is a trusted third party and which provides this kind of utilities. So in this case, just like the old Rome, the government invested in utilities, data utilities, in order to overcome the challenges. I truly believe that just as water, electricity, and cable have been developed as utilities, that for research data, the European Commission should invest in utilities, data or science data utilities that lower the barriers in order to implement those acts, but more to have the benefits of those stunning acts and to make them actionable. And this idea is something that I would like to take to the panel. Thank you.
All right. thank you very much, Raf, for the inspiring keynote and setting the scene, specifically with the thought of looking towards data as a utility, something we can elaborate a bit further on during the panel. And for our panel, of course, we have speakers to participate there. And unfortunately, I have to inform you that Boris Otto, unfortunately, couldn't make it due to an interoperability problem between the German and Belgian railway. Unfortunately, he is not here. But we are lucky that we have a replacement. This is very good. We have Ana Garcia Robles, who is the Secretary General of the Big Data Value Association and also very active within the Data Space Support Center at the European level. So welcome, Ana Garcia. You can please take a seat.
Hello.
Next, we would like to welcome Nathalie Bertels. Nathalie, she works at the Center of IT and IP Law at IMEC and the Katholieke Universiteit Leuven. She's a senior legal researcher and valorization expert, specialized in new technologies and development of data-driven services and products. Her research focuses on the legal and the ethical aspects of big data, IoT, and AI. She's also the co-chair of the Policy and Societal Task Force of the Big Data Value Association and active in the Data Space Support Center. Welcome, Nathalie. Give her some applause also, maybe. Yes, thank you.
Next up, if we could make the comparison between that data ecosystems are maybe as an army, we now have a 4-star general to announce. So the next panelist is Thomas Hahn, who has been since 2011 a chief fellow software at Siemens. Thomas had several responsibilities in the area of manufacturing as well, such as head of software development for industrial automation systems. And beyond his activities at Siemens, he is an active board member in various bodies, including the Open Lab at CERN, a steering committee for the platform Industry 4.0. He's vice president of the OPC Foundation, and that's where we know each other from, a board member also within the Gaia X Association. Please, have a seat, Thomas.
Our next speaker is Hakan, or panelist is Hakan Burden of RISE, that's the Research Institute of Sweden. Hakan is an expert in policy development with a focus on AI and IT systems, covering topics such as standardization of digital services for public transport and also initiatives with regulation on digitalization. A recurring theme is the interaction between technology development at one hand, new businesses and regulations. Welcome, Hakan.
And last but not least, we have Lucy Kirstein, who is a mobility expert and senior manager at the German National Academy of Science and Engineering, called Acatech. And she also acts as the coordinator for the EU-funded Mobility Data Space Deployment Project. So from 2017 until 2021, Lucy held a position at the International Transport Forum at the OECD, where she was responsible for various economic and policy studies and advised member ministries on transport policy and innovation strategies. All right, so now we have our panel complete, so we can begin. As Raf already indicated in his keynote speech, is that the past 5 years for the European Commission have been heavily focused on data. We've seen a lot of regulations coming up, like the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, a lot of investment going there as well, specifically within the Digital Europe program and within Horizon. But the main question is, okay, does this all work now? And specifically at the level of data governance, we see from one side innovation investment, and from the other side, relation. Do these things fit at the moment? Are we doing enough? Because we see bottom-up initiatives coming up, like data spaces, for example, in Flanders. We see top-down things happening. But does this all match? Maybe, if I could direct it to Thomas, do you have a first view on that?
Okay, perfect. The mic is working. Yeah, do we enough? Of course, always not, but we're doing sufficient topics, and I think we are on the good way. Maybe, and Raf explained a little bit about what is needed from a research perspective, you know, coming from industry. Maybe I say 2-3 examples what are driving us from industry, but I can tell you the pattern which you have elaborated before in your keynote speech are quite comparable. So when you're speaking about industry, and I give you 2 examples why the data exchange is, let's say, on the spot, also to get value out of the data with AI, it's on the spot. Because, you know, make a simple example, when you have a product carbon footprint reporting, you see in your own plant maybe 10%. I've spoken in the break when a colleague from another company, he said we see only 1% of the CO2 emission. So meaning the rest is in the upstream and downstream. Also what you are getting from let's say, from suppliers or where you're shipping your product to, and also the complete transportation. Also meaning to exchange data is somehow needed in a controlled way. I'm with you. Control is maybe not so adequate way, but in a way where you still are in control of your data, because when you're speaking about a machine, you have spoken about research results in a machine, also with the data of the machine, also some kind of IP are related how the machine is working. So meaning, this is one example in doing this, that meaning the data exchange, secure data exchange is on the spot also from industry. I can make a second example regarding battery. To recycle a battery, you can, by the way, the good message is you can recycle above 90% of the material of a battery, and you knowing, depending on rare earths, that is a really benefit. But you have to know how the battery is produced, how it is used, that you can make an efficient recycling. So meaning again here, you have to know the data let's say along the complete life cycle. That's what's driving us in industry, and also looking for manufacturing as a service, as a new business models which we want to target. Also meaning data exchanges on the spot. It's highly relevant, and different initiative where we can speak later about this. You mentioned also the Data Space Support Center, for example, and we can show a little bit how the initiative, because the theme of the conference from research to reality, how we are working together in this area, but this is the second part of the discussion. And now when you're speaking about governance, structure, regulation, I'm absolute with you, cost of data, standards, and also lack of trust, which we can also elaborate, let's say some kind of some major cornerstones. And you have also explained very well the European way of addressing this in comparison to China and US. And to be honest, to have some kind of rules of the game, it's good. But we have also to describe the rules of the game in an adequate way. I'm not touching in the area where Natalie is more the expert inside, but at the moment, you know, the different acts per se, the interaction between the different acts, think about Data Act and AI Act, how this is interlinked. This is really creating at the moment some kind of a headache, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises, how in doing this. So meaning this we have really to address, and we have really to think about of mitigation measures. Is this some kind of sandbox where you can elaborate testing? Are you compliant with the rules? Consulting and support, that you get the information in doing this. This is somehow a little bit absolute needed, because that we get the confidence in the security in the different laws, which is again an advantage, but at the moment when it's not clearly defined, a disadvantage where we have to really be careful. So it's roughly a little bit touching a little bit one of the aspects, but you covered a lot of things also in your keynote.
Yeah, it sounds actually quite familiar. Also coming from an industry association, we see a lot of members who are currently having questions. Like we have the Data Act, we have the Data Governance Act. That's all fine, but how do I put this now into practice?
Exactly.
And also, what is the relation with other projects, like, for example, the data spaces? Maybe Ana Garcia, if I can maybe ask you for your perspective on this. So we have the regulation part, we have the innovation, and as Ralph already mentioned, I think the Data Space Support Center also wants to play a crucial role in interconnecting these different activities. What is your view on this topic? Will maybe data spaces help towards complying to the regulations, or how do you see this evolving?
Okay, so I will answer your question also from the perspective of the fact that I had the opportunity for many years to really collaborate with many initiatives and projects and back-to-back with the new regulations. So maybe giving a bit of history as well and what I see where we are now. And as you said, with the data spaces, it's sufficient, it's not what we have to do. So something that I have to acknowledge up to now with the different regulations, I remember was GDPR years back, there was also, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, but there was an intention of balancing. Okay, there is a new regulation, so now we need really actions to support, to demonstrate how we can implement these regulations. And we had for many years very good pilots and projects that gave us a lot of light, okay? So, and I think that intention of now with the Data Governance Act, Data Act, but the AI Act as well, that brings a lot of requirements into data and many other acts. And then if you go to the different verticals, you start pulling acts until, different levels. There is also an intention of supporting, really companies and supporting industry, but it's completely insufficient. So it's not sufficient. And I tell you also why Thomas was saying now is the moment of data, and it's true that it's very clear that after years working on data, it's a moment that everything is open up and growing. We go from this research to deployment, and exactly at this moment that everything needs to grow, we have all these new regulations. And that's very complex. It creates even complexity within the Data Spaces Support Center. It's very difficult when we do the assessment, how we Suba, Natalie is the expert, but really brings complexity even for the experts. But now going back to your 3 pillars, I think I missed one, that is literacy. Well, with all these new regulations, people need to be really informed. They really need to know a lot. And we really are going to need major support for compliance. So compliance, I think, is going to be a key topic after all the ones that we've been discussing, interoperability, etc. To your question, will data spaces be the answer to that? I don't think it will be the answer to all the questions, but I think it's important as we work in this ecosystem perspective, and we really want to bring all the different components. I think data spaces will help a lot, and many of the tools for compliance should be actually integrated in these data spaces. But as per today, also from the Data Spaces Support Center, working with all the different verticals, I have to acknowledge that it's a very hard moment. And again, it's not only the vertical, let's say the horizontal regulations, but then you go to the different verticals, even when we have to go to cross-sectorial and synergies, we will talk about that later, and complexity really grows. So support is needed, yes.
All right, a clear message. I saw that Hakan wanted to react.
Yes, please, thank you. I thought about this emerging or complete complexity that comes from all the new regulations, and the feeling I get that it sort of makes people just stand still, like a deer in the headlights of an onrushing car and just standing there waiting for something to happen. If I wait 2 more minutes, perhaps I have some better idea of what's going to happen. 3 minutes, 20 seconds, how long should I be standing here waiting for something to happen? And I think what we've done, and I say we because I'm doing it together with my colleague Suzanne, not because I feel like royal family. What we've been doing is that we've been taking the acts while they're being negotiated. And then we have customers out there who want to have clarity, so we collaborate with them. And one thing we did, we took the Data Act, and this was, let's see, the report is 1 year old, so this was in the autumn of 22. We took the Data Act in its current state and we made an analysis. We have this ecosystem of actors within the public transport sector. they want to know, what's the Data Act for us? So we had an OEM from the vehicle industry, we had technology suppliers, we had public actors in terms of public transport authorities, we had operators within the public transport domain, and we took them together and we analyzed what does the Data Act mean for them. And one of the key takeaways is that, yes, the OEM, the vehicle manufacturer, might lose some services because their competitors could now offer services for their vehicles. But that goes both ways, right? So if there's a risk that I will be losing customers because I'm tearing down the silo on top of my product for servitization, my competitors are facing the same risk. That means that as an OEM on the west coast of Sweden, I might have 10% of the product market, 10%. That's quite good. But I could have 30%, 40%, 50%, 60% of the servitization market. And the Act's not even there yet, so I have plenty of time to prepare for that. So I can start talking to my customers. You know, this Data Act is going to be in place. We have a brilliant offer for you. It's a vehicle-agnostic fleet service management system. Independent, if you buy our vehicles or our competitors' vehicles, we can deliver this resource optimization service to you. Are you in? And I find that that's a brilliant opportunity for doing some kind of research, but also innovation, and being prepared for a shifting market, because the Data Act is deliberately being disruptive. Yeah. And it's clearly in the Data Act that it's going to be disruptive. So why wait to see what that means? I can be a part of that change and make it work for me.
Okay, thank you. Nathalie, you work as a legal expert. You look at quite some detail into all these different acts. How do you look at this topic of data governance, and do you see some differences in like more strictly research-related projects that handle data governance, or in more applied projects and initiatives?
Okay, thank you for the question, Simon. I think that data governance is a concept with multiple meanings. As you already mentioned in the introduction, when we all think of data governance, maybe initially we think of a more technically inspired concept of data management, maybe contained within a company, within a research organization. But what we are seeing now is an increased complexity. We want to valorize and we want to capture this value of data, data economy, data-driven society. So we clearly need to evolve towards a multidisciplinary, more concept of data governance that takes the angle of law, that takes the angle of business, of technology, of organizational sciences. So we need this new concept of data governance. And we see indeed within research and innovation that we have this element of the new data and digital legislation. The existing ones, the ones we've known before, the Open Data Directive, the GDPR, but also the new ones, an execution of the data strategy. And they already contain core elements to create the governance of data in research and innovation. But as was already mentioned before by the other panelists here, there's the interaction between the different frameworks. There's the challenge of roles and responsibilities, certain concepts that are still unclear that have to be taken into account when mapping and simultaneously applying those different legal frameworks. There are organizational measures, the issue of scalability. So we see in research and innovation a lot of new elements that challenge the data governance and that require us to actually research it as such and to try and create those frameworks and those tools, etc. And then we see that I think the concept of data spaces really gives it a strategic push here, this discussion, and that also towards deployment. We've seen that in the deployment projects that there is also an active engagement with issues on data governance. I know that, for instance, in the deploy mobility data space, where we also take a look at multi-level governance. So there's the realization that you don't have governance at one level in creating a data space. So for me, it's indeed the realization that it's a new concept that we are developing that has these levels of complexity that we need to take into account, the push of the strategic concept of data spaces in this discussion, and to also look at the legal frameworks, especially taking into account that, for instance, for research, you have certain exceptions, certain limitations that only apply to research and don't apply necessarily to the deployment context. So I think there we need to shine light on them and then evaluate indeed how we could deal with them and take it further.
Yeah, that's clear. Lucy, you are the actual coordinator of the project Nathalie is referring to. Is data governance then handled in a different way within this data space project? Do you see something hopefully?
Yeah, I think there's really a need to break things down. So, of course, the whole data governance concept is really the entirety of the arrangements that you have, for example, for the technical aspects, for the policy aspects, for regulation, for institutional aspects that really shape data and their entire life cycle. So you have the creation or the collection of data, you have the storage, you have access, you have sharing or then deletion at the end. And for us, currently, it's really, or what Håkan said, really paralyzing sometimes is that people in the projects are not able to break down the one ambitious goal into several smaller goals. So we see that some, also at the level of the EC, very abstract goals, without maybe first having clearly spelled out the exact use cases or the exact problems that we want to tackle. So in our context, we see really a great value of working with case studies and really seconding what you said there on really looking at the whole steps involved and scenarios involved in certain aspects, because the legislation that is coming or is being developed can be quite abstract and difficult to grasp in terms of what it means for enforcement, for example. And we see that another issue is really the data economy as a concept is very unclear at the moment. Of course, data holders' incentives to invest in the collection and sharing of data really depends also on the expected returns. I have to say that as an economist also, that we lose interest from stakeholders when there's not a clear case to be made for a certain use case. There's not enough interest when you don't have the possibility to present a one killer use case that can really show you the value of sharing data. So we really need to think research also more strongly into the adoption side. We might have to also look into more interdisciplinary research, because the economic or the social aspects, anything that's connected to adoption or to or even ethics or any other problems that might pop off are not sufficiently tackled, I think. Yeah, so yeah, just an example maybe to finish is from Deploy EMDS, or our deployment project that's funded under Digital Europe, is that we're trying to also integrate KPIs for the creation of innovation ecosystems in the 9 cities and regions that we work with. So we have KPIs on, for example, how many onboarded participants, how much data is actually being made available, etc.
Yeah, that actually sounds quite familiar, so to say, because when I talk to local stakeholders to set up projects, we also really see them struggle to find a business case. And especially if you're 10, 20 different organizations who each need to have their specific business case to start up this process, it becomes quite complex. So I agree that maybe there are things which can be done there. Maybe, I think maybe the tone has been a little negative on, oh, this is complex, difficult.
So complex.
Let's try to take maybe a bit more the positive approach, because there are a lot of things going on. From my perspective, a lot of inspiring projects. Maybe can we have some examples of projects or research where data governance has been addressed and which are, let's say, being deployed already or at a very close stage to deployment? Maybe Thomas, I know you're involved in certain projects, so maybe you can share us some things that work.
Okay, I will do my best. And it's not negative what we discussed. We are looking also only, let's say, what we have to do. I think that's a good thing that we're discussing this. And coming back also to Hagen's word, we are not standing still. We are looking what we can do. And also when, let's say, the business case is up to now still not completely clear. You know, I'm coming from industrial company, that's the reason. I give you two examples. One is in the automotive industry, you know, when you're looking along the complete supply chain, and think about my previous example regarding a CO2 footprint or a battery. You know, there are a lot of suppliers, tier N bis tier 1, automotive OEM, who building the car and the destruction. So they are setting up some kind of data economy, and these are since 3, 4, 6 months, don't ask me, somehow last year it's running, and they have some kind of positive aspects. For sure, not everything is clear about business models but there is really a mood, and coming back, Hagen, to your example, to get out of their own ecosystem to go to a joint ecosystem with a C. First with a G, the ecosystem, and now going to an ecosystem with a C regarding data economy. That's what we are doing, what we are addressing, and you know, and here when you ask me research or industry, I cannot tell you the precise border inside the project because we are working close together. Also meaning also back research to reality, what is ongoing. And what we are now doing is in the next area is, and my apologies, coming from manufacturing, we are looking how we can have this horizontal aspect down to the shop floor. You know, connectivity, how we can look in other development or industries, machine tool building industry, process industry, aerospace industry, semiconductor. We have heard a fantastic keynote at the beginning where we have looking how we are elaborating this. What are the concrete use cases? When you ask me from pattern, you know, we're always looking what is the impact, what we want to realize, what is the use case, what are business model which we know or maybe not know, that's my aspect, what are the foundation, trusted framework, verified credential, standards, battery passport, how we make this in a general and really are close to the deployment. Also I'm not pessimistic, other way around. I have more mood, like you said. Go ahead. Also, where some kind of unclear topics are, but go ahead and doing this. Also, when you have not known the complete picture, because you know you win a little bit more when you're doing this in the ecosystem. That's let's say the mood, and we make it maybe on one touch point international. Because you know when you're thinking about it's depending on industry domain to industry domain, but when you're speaking about manufacturing, you have always the complete topic, and we should not underestimate that, let's say, the thoughts in other countries. When you're speaking with people from Japan, they have a similar understanding about how to handle data in a secure way, for example, or they have a similar understanding that we have to do something in a way to achieve something for our environment, CO2 footprint example, and they want also to implement some kind of digital product passport to make it concrete. And now we are touching a little bit the borders that we have really to look what are the international frameworks, the trust framework, the standards, Maybe the implementation is depending in the country. That's the reason why we have to look more like a federated data ecosystem. That's what we are touching. But this is what is ongoing. So a lot is ongoing. We make it also in alignment, data space support center, and now always struggling Dataspace 4.0 initiative and smart tenants. You know, when you're speaking about European project funded from the Horizon Europe or the Digital Europe program, but we are touching this very concrete and directly.
Thank you. Lucy, you wanted to react?
No, I think this is a very interesting example, especially with the digital product passes, because it's a prime example of how you try to implement policies that shape the demand side for data intermediation, so really for creating a market for trusted data exchange. It can also be in the logistics and sharing data across value chains. This is also value chain transparency topic that we're also looking into in the EDIC process, but really using policies to creating markets is quite an interesting case.
All right. First, Ana Garcia.
Yeah, I would like to add on top of these great examples that Thomas and Lucy has commented, a few more. And by the way, I don't think we were negative before, but okay, let's bring the positive aspect of how past projects are helping us. And I want to put a couple, actually 2 examples, and then talk a bit about how we are doing in the Data Spaces Support Center. But first, very connected also with the topic of the data utilities that I hope we talk about that later, how we support the companies. So I think for years we have been also in collaboration with the European Commission developing projects where we're different data incubators and different, let's say, data experimentation facilities, so to call it, were really helping companies to understand what data exchange means from the data governance, from the data sharing, but also from the data value perspective. So making sure that then the data was used for AI, for different purposes. And thanks to a very important project that is called EUHAS for Data that is about to finish, we federated all that. And we now actually RISE is one of the organizations that is actually behind this project, and it's a very good example. We learned so much. So all the different hubs, all the different data incubators behind this, they learned too much that now we really want to use this as a very important tool to help companies to join data spaces, because it's not going to be so, wow, I want to go in a data space, and probably Lucy and others, you have the experience that really, you know, there is a maturity level also for companies, and they really need to have this support. So I think there is a very good story, because it's about how these companies learned about their own data governance and the rules and what type of data quality, what kind of metadata, what kind of data security, all these important aspects that they need to take care before they connect to a data space. So I think this is already a very good story. Then I have to say, by my collaboration with many of the preparatory actions and even some of the deployment actions we are working with from the Data Spaces Support Center, many of predecessor projects in data platforms, in really research projects that came years back, have been really fundamental to make these preparatory actions, you know, to evolve quicker, because there was a lot of knowledge behind. So I think this is an important aspect as well. And then from Data Spaces Support Center, something that we bring from the past to the future, and we feel also very positive about it. You know, there are several key associations part of Data Spaces Support Center. So we have Gaia, we have IDSA, we have MyData, BDBA, we have FIWARE. So we all bring behind so much knowledge in our communities and projects, and that's what we are trying to channel into the program of data spaces. Is this knowledge that we have developed for years that we really want to channel through Data Space Support Center. So I think it's all very good examples of how we are building in terms of, okay, our data governance, all the different layers that Natalie was mentioning. This is more organizational, but how we are really helping to make this happen.
Thank you. Maybe for you, Raf, so we have now these new acts, this Data Act to to basically increase the reuse of the Data Governance Act to establish this trust. But is this act alone, will it be enough?
So these acts are good initiatives. I'm quite positive about it, but it's not enough. I think when there's a new act, the first thing the Commission should do is to check whether it's digitally executable. When you define in legislation roles, please do define the semantics of those roles, that you have a machine readable form of your legislation, like kind of a digital twin of your legislation that you can use in your projects. Second, on the level of interoperability, I think we had certain waves. First, we had like XML for interoperability in your organization. Then we had like linked data cross organizational interoperability. But I think we need interoperability on the level of logic, like engine interoperability, when we share data, that we can share along with the data the policy around the data. So that we have logic and that we know, can we use this data for a dashboard, or can we use it for actuators, for pumps, or other things, that we have executable policies traveling along with the data, that we also have provenance traveling along with the data, so that we have an idea, is this real data, is this synthetic data, and what can I expect from the data? So I think the third wave of interoperability should be about logic and algorithms that travel along with the data.
Want to add, Hakan?
Yeah, I like the idea. I just think that if you have a controlled natural language, feasible, that makes it possible to actually implement legal text which is unambiguous, which only has one interpretation. I don't know what that text would look like, but my guess it will be even more boring to read than law. And I also think you miss an opportunity, because now we have all these new policies emerging, and they don't have a set interpretation yet. They will have in, say, 5 to 7 years, we will be quite comfortable in guessing what they mean if they ever came to court. But today there's actually a wiggle room. There's actually some place where you can start saying, well, we have this new policy in place, and it's not really certain how to interpret that, so I'll make the first interpretation. I'm setting down my foundational stone here, and then you can have opinions about that and relate to what I did. That's a brilliant position to be in. That's why you have all these data space associations saying, well, our way of annotating data is probably an international standard. Because that's a brilliant way of setting down, this is how we share data. And the same goes for law. There's an open room for interpretation, and I'm taking that room, thank you. And if you don't agree, do something else, show that I'm wrong, and I'll adjust. But I'm going to be the first one out. You will be following me. That's a quite strong position to be in, right? And I wouldn't like to lose that opportunity. And I can't myself take all of those opportunities. I gladly see what you as a community will contribute with in facing that challenge and making that position. But I think there's an opportunity here, and I would like to be part of taking it.
Yeah, it would be more transparent, because for me today, laws are like sausages. You don't want to know what's in it, and you don't want to know how they were made.
Yes, that's a good one. Okay, thank you very much. So I have one final question for all panelists. That's basically your key recommendation within this area, this complex area of data governance for the next commission. So Lucy, please go.
Okay, so I'm first.
Lucy, you're first, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really always a bit tricky to criticize the efforts that are there, because they already go into the right direction. They already try to align between funding programs, and there's already quite some follow-up on promising solutions and testing them and seeing how they work. I think it's now also about the actors involved in these actions to take their own ownership and really see, okay, if I'm not seeing any concrete guidance coming from the top, why don't I, and this really resonates with you, Håkan, why don't I also express how I would see this vision going forward and really take the really the ownership for the questions, for looking at the scenarios, looking which scenarios fits for me.
Okay.
So I think I've seen a very positive shift, that we've gone from strong technology-driven funding programs and maybe having policy or governance like an add-on, maybe. And today there are calls where it's definitely an integrated part of the research, that there should be governance, there should be policy development. We should combine technology with knowing how to apply it to do something that's useful and benefits society in compliance with the laws that we are putting in place. And I think that shift is really positive, and I just want to see more of it. Thank you.
Okay, let's say three more recommendations. One, when we're speaking about research to reality, when we're looking also from the basic research to research, applied research, to use it in industry, I think look what is the impact and the use case, what we want to achieve together. That would be I highlighted the word together. That's the first topic. Second topic is, when we're speaking about regulation, I think we need some kind of consolidation phase and should avoid overlapping, when a medical device regulation existing or functional safety in the manufacturing thing is existing, we can also use these methods and so on in other topics. And last but least, let's say in general, no company, no country, I think the colleague from IMEC at the beginning said this also very clear, we have to work together, and we have really to shift from an ecosystem to an ecosystem, because the opportunities which we have ahead of us, nobody can solve alone, and the opportunities are big which we can do together.
Thank you. I think for me, the first point, I would like to repeat the need for support. So to provide those guidelines on the regulatory frameworks. And I would say that we try to do this identifying triggers. So we do this actor dedicated. So we know not with a full map, maybe we can find the ingredients for the sausage, but to the extent you want to know them. So what you need to know to be able to be compliant. And the second point would be to start preparing also within data governance for the AI Act. So I think we need some proactive planning towards the forthcoming AI Act, and that we could integrate those considerations into our future-proof data governance strategy. So we take into account the entire life cycle, and especially also in that way connecting the data spaces to AI training and leveraging them to make sure that we have access to high-quality data and that we can help train and develop effective models. And the third point would be that we want to continue, as you already said, Thomas, this collaborative, adaptive approach. I think the importance of these CSA projects, and especially then the one Data Spaces Support Center, if I can mention that one again. I think it's super important to have this continuous dialogue with the different stakeholders that are working together here.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anna?
Yeah, so the second recommendation from Natalie was going to be my third recommendation, so here we have more votes. But now following first with the ecosystem perspective, now it seems that we are really starting the race of the real ecosystems. Ecosystems mean this is not a solo game. The more we are, the more value we generate. But again, to enter these ecosystems, we need to be prepared. And this is the aspect of the internal data governance. We really need to help companies to be prepared. And I think this is still a lot of work to do, and it's not only companies coming from the session of AI for healthcare, hospitals, any kind of organization, public, private, because we all generate data and we need to share that data, even personal data, right? That's the first recommendation. Second, and that links with something that Ralph said at the beginning, we don't want to create silos between data spaces. We are working hard. But the synergies between data spaces, the overall governance of a very complex ecosystem of many different data spaces is something that we need to address. So we cannot expect that a company who wants to access data needs to know what data space needs to join or etc. So that's an important part. And my last point, it was actually this connection with the AI Act, with the AI, and in general to the overall digital ecosystem, but in particular with the value creation, which is fundamental and where we really need to now put the effort. How, once we are an ecosystem, once we share, how really make the most value out of it.
Raf, very quickly, some final words.
Some final words. Well, going back to my pitch, first of all, data utilities with shared building blocks from Europe, that they have to think, how are we going to make this legislation executable? And if this means that there need to be semantics, open source building blocks, lower the barriers. Second, working on trust, as I mentioned. Third, also focusing on standards, but also on logic that travels with the data, with the focus on the policies. And fourth, what was not in my presentation, but you mentioned it, literacy.
All right, super. So that's a lot of messages. Now we arrive at the conclusion for the panel. Normally that's something you'd say the speakers would do, the moderators would do, but we are a bit lazy. So we invited someone else to give us the conclusions of today's panel discussion. Kimmo Rossi, who is the head of sector in the Data Policy and Innovation Unit of DG Connect within the European Commission. So Kimmo, can I invite you on stage for some closing remarks? Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. First, I want to thank the organizers for this very relevant and timely session. This was exactly what was needed at this point. So my task is to here in this event to go around and listen and to take notes and to take messages home. Because the work that we do in our unit is threefold. So we are shaping data strategies, like the one from February 2020. Secondly, data legislation, like the ones that were mentioned tens of times, Data Governance Act, Data Act, Open Data Directive, and our colleagues are working on the AI Act, very closely related as well. And then the third pillar is a wonderful portfolio of research and innovation projects, and now even more and more also deployment projects, and there will be more and more of those. And the purpose of those projects is actually to go hand in hand with the policy work and the legislation work in order to Ralph, if I can use your expression, to make the legislation digitally executable. from the beginning. That is our job. So that's why I'm glad that you mentioned it and that you highlight that the importance. And the bottlenecks that are there for data flow, and the purpose of data governance should be actually to get rid of those bottlenecks and to serve the user, to serve the practitioner. Thank you, Anna, also for stepping in at short notice to this panel. I take note of what you said about the literacy and the support for compliance. And what we actually want to support is we have been funding projects on compliance tools for legislation. We want to continue that support, but develop it more to something that we can call compliance by design, so that entire systems would be compliant at the outset, so without you having to master a bag of tools and plug them in, and so to remove all the complexity from processes like data spaces, to make data spaces ultimately automatically compliant, so that they would automate compliance transparently for the user, so that this would remove this huge burden that is otherwise building up on top of our heads, and that what Håkan mentioned, the effect of paralysis, that otherwise we suddenly end up a situation where we cannot do anything and we can go nowhere. So this is a one step towards that direction, is to build in this concept of compliance by design. I want to use this opportunity for a small promotional announcement that we have a call for proposals ongoing for exactly this, compliance by design technologies. The deadline is the 19th of March. So it's the topic Data 0101 in the work program. So there is still time. And a pre-announcement for the Digital Europe call, which has not yet opened, but should be opening at the end of February, where we will be stepping to a very exciting new era of actually deploying some data spaces. Some data spaces are already in deployment, but what is going to be addressed in this soon opening call is the deployment of the Green Deal data space, the energy data space, the mobility data space, and no less than 2 different topics for the health data space. So opening around 29th of February, so let's say, then it will stay open for 3 months, so that the submission deadline for that call would be 29th of May. So just to put in brief the messages that I take home from this, that we have to build the data spaces for the users and not for anything else. Yes, they can serve AI development, but nobody will have interest in the data spaces if they do not serve those who are in them and who should provide material to them. And also data spaces, if they serve the users, they will finally support themselves, and they will not require funding after the 3 or 4 years of the funded project, but they will be able to be self-sustaining. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kimmo. So this marks the end of our session. The only thing left to do is actually thank our speakers. So can I have a warm round of applause?
Yeah. So also like to thank the people online and the people here. Final words. This session was also powered by the Belgian Data Space Alliance. So that's an alliance of, let's say, data space believers in Belgium. We also have a booth, so if you want to know more about it, please come to visit us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.